From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Face the State on the Montana Television Network. I'm Mike Dennison, the Chief Political Reporter for the network. Last week we talked about the election results in Montana. This week we continue in the political mode on Face the State as we talk about the upcoming Montana legislature, which convenes just 7 weeks from tomorrow on January 7th. Montana Republicans still have the majorities in both houses, 58-42 in the House, 30-20 in the Senate. Last week, Republicans and Democrats chose their leaders for the upcoming session. And Democratic Governor Steve Bullock also released his proposed budget for the next 2 years. The legislature will decide how it wants to change that budget before approving it, and will tackle a host of other issues, including Medicaid expansion, drug abuse, energy development, and much more. Today, to talk about the roadmap for the session, we have two leaders, one from each party and each house. Republican Senate Majority Leader Fred Thomas of Stevensville and Democratic House Minority Leader Casey Schreiner of Great Falls. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
And let's start out with you, Senator Thomas. As I mentioned, Republicans control majorities in both houses and have done so for most of the past decade. Yeah. Yet we have a Democratic governor, Steve Bullock. Given the dynamics, what's the agenda of the Republican majorities coming into the 2019 session?
Well, part of our agenda is to get in to the session and as effectively and efficiently do the budget work for the state of Montana, taking care of our schools, our human services, those sort of things. Get this done timely, done real well, and work with the governor to get that accomplished. And we'll deal with a litany of different issues, of course, like we always do. But this is more of a budget session, and we want to do more of cooperation with the governor. He's got other plans, and that's just fine. And so we want to work with him as timely as we can and then move forward. Our biggest focus is going to be planning for the 21 session. We hope to elect a Republican governor in 2020 and have that person to work with in the 21 session coming.
And we'll come back to that subject, but you think there'll be any initiatives on the part of the GOP majority? Are you just be reacting to the governor, or what the governor sends you? Or are you going to say, okay, here's some things we'd like to do to take the state in a different direction?
Oh yeah, we'll have those things as well, because we don't want to challenge the governor, but we want to encourage him to work with us to develop the economy in Montana so that there's better paying jobs and more economy here, so that revenues raise naturally with a better economy.
Representative Schreiner, on the Democratic side, you're in the minority again.
Yep.
And what does your caucus hope to accomplish, and how are you going to do it when you don't have the votes outright to do it?
Yeah, Mike, I think that we're in a position to be very successful this semester, this is college or something,
yeah.
This session. I mean, look what we've done in the past. We've been successful in passing Medicaid expansion. We've been successful in doing things like the CSKT, water compact. In all those situations, we've been in maybe the minority as far as politics is concerned, but we're in the working majority. And I think that's where our focus will be. It was great to hear Senator Thomas talk about working with the governor, and we're gonna fund education, and we're gonna help rural communities, because those are our priorities as well. We may have a little different idea on how we get there, but I think that's where we're at, and I think that those are the values that Montana hopes they see in their legislature.
Of course, we mentioned the governor's budget, which was released last week. A lot of things in there. Representative Schreiner, the governor, of course, is a Democrat. Is this a budget Democrats will support? Anything in there you think is missing, anything problematic, or anything you'd really want to point to as something needs to get done?
No, I think it's a budget that we'll support. I mean, I was very impressed with the concept, especially on the infrastructure front, the funding of education. We've really dropped the ball as a legislature as far as not putting in the inflationary on special education. And I can tell you, as a dad of two students that actually use those services, that's been something that we've missed as a state, and we've really, as I said, dropped the ball. I think that the main focuses that we're going to look at is obviously how do we fund 100,000 people's health insurance? How do we make sure those people don't get dropped off the rolls, which isn't just about health insurance, but it completely changes our state's economy, the jobs that have been created, in addition to the fact that we have a tradition of looking after our friends and neighbors. So,
of course, we're talking about Medicaid expansion, which we'll come back to and talk about in greater detail. First, I wanted to go to you, Senator Thomas, to talk more about the governor's budget. When you look at that, I'm assuming there's some things in there that you say, we're not going to support. I'm just wondering, what are those things in there? There are some tax increases, we talked about those before, but what are the parts of the budget that give you a little bit of a problem?
Well, the governor has come back, unfortunately, and is proposing another set of tax increases kind of across the board in fees and tobacco and tobacco products, rental car.
Mostly sales type taxes on various products.
Yeah, across the board, and then professional fees to raise a bunch of money there on people that get licenses. And so he proposed a lot of this in the 17 session. He proposed it in the special session, which wasn't a necessary session in hindsight. And now he's proposing them again. Now the public just voted down some of his tax increases that he's proposing again.
The tobacco taxes.
And so it's kind of like, well, what don't we get here? So let me say this. In the 90s and the 2000s, the Republican legislatures and governors worked hard to make our tax structure very competitive, and it is. And we're not going to backtrack on that. And so these tax increases that he's proposing again are probably just simply not going to fly, not with us. They might with the Democrats, I don't know, but not with us.
Well, Representative Schreiner, it sounds like you want to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's a little disappointing because a number of these proposals are things that the industries that they're being effective have been very okay with. They understand that for us to move the ball and improve the Montana economy, we have to make very strategic investments in where we do that. I think it's kind of funny that we pivoted. That very first pivot was to go to talk about future plans. Well, I think it's crazy that we're talking about 2021 and 2020. We need to do our job now, and we need to solve problems for this session and not be worried about who we're running for governor. Our job isn't to do that. Our job is to pass policies and make sure that we have Montana's economy and people in a position to be successful into the future. I think that's what this budget does. I think the political rhetoric on raising taxes is just that. It's political rhetoric. I think that the people of Montana, specifically to the tobacco tax, yeah, they push back, but they're also, as I think was pointed out at one point, spent more money on killing this than we probably would have spent on helping some of those people with Medicaid expansion. So I think we need to be very, very cognizant of the fact that this isn't about 2020, this isn't about 2021, this should be about today and tomorrow and how we make sure that Montanans are taken care of right now.
Well, as far as taxes, though, I don't know if it's political rhetoric. I mean, when I talked last week with Republican leaders and members of the Republican caucus, they're pretty clear. One of their main platforms is they want to resist any tax increases, which I'd like to ask you, Senator, about. So you're saying that there's nothing that we want to invest in as a state for our people that's worth raising any tax on anything or anyone? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that when we come back to the basics of we have a competitive tax climate in this state today that generates new jobs and new revenue to the state because of our economy's doing better. Certainly, we had a bad 8 years under President Obama. We got out of that, now we're doing better. Revenues are raising, and while we don't know exactly what those revenues will come in, particularly for this fiscal year or calendar year we're in, because filings are April 15th, so we don't know for sure what monies will come in, but they will be higher, no doubt, because the economy is doing so much better. That's how you raise revenue. You don't raise revenue by taxing and driving people out of the state like California's been doing. I mean, their taxes are horrible there, and if they didn't have good weather, all of them would leave down there because the taxes are horrible. So we're not close to that, but that's our philosophy. And when we're planning for 21, yes, we are looking forward to that. Whoever the Republicans nominate for governor, that's up to them when they do that. But we're looking forward to that because then we can have a governor to work with that will sign good legislation instead of vetoing it.
Representative Schreiner, I'd like to just maybe have you respond a little bit, if you'd like, to about his talk about why no tax increases at all. And also, with Democrats are often saying we need to spend money on this, we need to expand to do this, to invest in the state. What about cutting government? We have a $10 billion budget over a couple of years. Isn't there somewhere in there where we can maybe cut something rather than just saying, oh, we need to raise taxes to pay for this and that?
Oh, I would agree with that, Mike, and I think that you'll find the Democratic caucus does view the efficiency of government, how we spend money, as one of our top priorities. I will say the way it's been done in the past, and it's good that the good senator talked about how the special session was not needed. We can debate that, but I can tell you if it wasn't needed, we probably didn't make permanent the draconian cuts that happened during the special session that hurt Montanans across, and every one of us, I'm sure, have heard how painful that has been for our communities and for some of us are family members. So I think that Democrats are willing to go in, figure out where your budget reflects your priorities. I think the budget that we're going to move forward with, and we all know that the governor's budget's not going to come out looking exactly like it did from day one, but where we want to invest is in the people of Montana. We want to find places where we can find efficiencies and pull back on places that maybe there is duplication of services. We are interested in those conversations, but whenever the majority talks about cutting things, they're talking about cutting services to people. That's what we saw. The special session proved that. There was no need to make those permanent cuts, and most, if not 80% of those cuts affected people, everyday Montanans. They're just trying to live their lives. We stood up, me specifically, said we won't be a part of this. We won't vote for one of these things, but they still got done at a permanent level, and Montanans were hurt.
But it sounds like both of you are on the same page, is hoping to restore those cuts if possible this session. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we haven't made a ironclad, yes we will, but in general, I think it's fair to say we want to get rid of the governor's cuts, and let's make sure that it's clear. Those cuts put in place in the general session, or the special session, were proposed by the governor, and they were not changed in any way, shape, or form by the Republican Party. We did put them in place because that was the only thing he proposed to reduce and make that budget thing work that he proposed. He said revenue would be down. We needed to meet. Okay, we bought into that. He would only do those cuts. That's what he proposed. We put them in place with a bunch of transfers. We balanced the budget in accordance with what he said needed to be done. That's his doings, not ours.
Although he did vote no on tax increases that would have avoided those cuts. Correct.
Yes, he did say you could raise taxes and not do that. But then remember this though, the revenue came through and came through, and the session was not needed. So his cuts were not needed.
Well, and Mike, I would push back and say, before they were made permanent by the legislature, they were budget reductions with an opportunity to put money back in that did not get majorly overcomplicated as what ended up happening with the special session, which is how we didn't end up getting money back out to the people who actually need it. Had we not gone forward, and if those were the proposed budget reductions that the governor put forward, which is true, the senator is right, but they weren't permanent. It's the permanency of that actually that hurt people for the long term.
But we'll be talking about that in the future, so I don't think we need to hash that out too much anymore. Let's go back to Medicaid expansion. Senator Thomas, of course, you mentioned voters turned down I-185, which would have extended Medicaid expansion and raised tobacco taxes to pay for part of it. So does that mean we just say no more Medicaid expansion? What are Republicans saying in terms of dealing with that deadline on the expiration of Medicaid expansion?
Yeah. Well, it is a big issue. It still is a big issue, even though the public just voted on that. Now, in the governor's budget that he proposed, he's ignoring the fact that the public just turned that initiative down, and he's proposing to do exactly the same thing, or apparently, we don't have all the details, what the public said no to at the ballot box. So it's kind of like, wow, you don't even listen to them. But anyway, we think this, and that's that before we just go back and look at Medicaid expansion, we think that we ought to look at Medicaid reform in a general sense. The fee-for-service system is a broken old system. There ought to be reforms looked at and start down that road of reforming so that people on Medicaid, standard Medicaid, normal Medicaid, that are our priorities with disabled, blind, pregnant women, seniors, that they're getting a better value for what they're going to the doctor for, or the hospital. Then if we can make some headway there in this session, then let's look at expansion and see what we can do there. Certainly if we do that, there's got to be a litany of things considered of the work requirement, co-payments, premiums, asset test. All those things need to be looked at and considered in order to move that ball forward. And so we're open to doing that, but we want to look at this bigger picture first, and then the expansion crowd, which was just voted down by the public in essence, which is a group of people that are able-bodied and can go to work and will work more hours and not be on Medicaid at all. So there's a set of priorities there. The cuts that the governor did and proposed that hurt disabled people, they were caused by Medicaid expansion, which had no way and no plan to pay for it. There was zero plan ever put in place to how we will get to paying for it, except as it ended up, they were cuts to disabled people's services.
Representative Schreiner, I'm sure you disagree with a lot
I
of that.
disagree with most of what
okay.
the concerns. So it's good because Brett and I get along pretty well.
But you can certainly reply to him or rebut him. But as you do that, I would like to know, Medicaid expansion. If we go forward with the program unchanged, I mean, it's going to cost the state, $50 to $60 million a year. Where's that money coming from?
Well, we put forward, in partnership with the governor, I think a budget that explains how we do those things. It does take investments from the people of Montana. But the fact that the number came out to be larger than what we anticipated just shows that there's a bigger need than what we anticipated. I will push back and say when we hear reforms of Medicaid, that means we want to kick people off. We don't want people to have health insurance. The numbers before we went into, when there was a conversation about special session this last summer, it was set a line, we want to cut 15,000 people minimum off of Medicaid. At the end of the day, that's not healthy. That's not the way we do business. The Montana system's been successful. I mean, even on the piece through the HelpLink program that our state runs, getting people back to work, we've seen a significant percentage increase of Medicaid eligible people go back into the workforce. The program's been successful. We're seeing health outcomes. We shouldn't be looking to try and trim off who gets healthy and who doesn't by picking winners and losers. That's what I think the majority is saying. They want to kick people off of their health insurance, and we just don't agree with that. I think that's what we can say reform, but let's just be honest.
Senator Thomas, one thing, I mean, when you say you want to look at Medicaid outside of Medicaid expansion first, and what do you mean? I mean, I've never heard anyone say that's a screwed up program. I mean, you're talking about the Medicaid for the disabled and Medicaid for children, pregnant women. You want to take a look at that and do what exactly?
Well, we need to look at the reforms that will drive a better outcomes for patients, the disabled, low-income seniors, pregnant women.
And what does that mean exactly?
Well, it could be a preferred provider program that you pay different rates and people have responsibilities.
So perhaps a managed care type of program?
Managed care, all those sort of things. I don't know the exact best formula there, but there's a lot of things to be done there. We're kind of dealing with an old broken fee-for-service system in health insurance, let alone Medicaid. So our priorities are the disabled, low-income seniors, pregnant women, and blind individuals that qualify for traditional Medicaid. We want to make sure they're taken care of first.
So what I'm not hearing you say, though, is that the Republican majority is not committed to extending Medicaid expansion, which covers 100,000 people and brings in $500 million a year in federal money. You're not committed to that.
We're committed to looking at that if we can get some movement on this other subject. Exactly how you then re-look at expanded Medicaid populations, that's a different story. And the thought that you would just carte blanche leave people on Medicaid expansion that have the assets to pay for themselves. There's no asset test today. And people that are wealthy or have all their money over in the cooperative qualify for Medicaid expansion today. And that's just brainless as far as a public policy to say, you've got the money, but we'll pay for your insurance. That doesn't make any sense. It's just brainless.
And Representative Schreiner, as far as Medicaid expansion, 100,000 people on it. Initially, the estimate was as many as 70,000. Now we have 100,000. Why aren't Democrats saying, hey, we have to take a look at this program and tighten this down a little bit? We have to come up with some restrictions and say maybe everyone who's on this doesn't really deserve to be getting it.
Well,
as the senators.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think it's a straw man to say that there's all these Montanans out there who are millionaires that are qualifying for Medicaid.
Well,
there's no data that supports that. That's a talking point. I will say Democrats have been very forward about this, and that the way that we get them off of our Medicaid is not to go out and reduce the opportunities through Medicaid, but it's to increase their wages. Last session, we did a number of things that were very focused on businesses being successful, which gives them the opportunity. I carried a tax credit for apprenticeship installation in places that people may want to get into the primary sector or provide an opportunity for businesses to actually help train workers, higher skill sets, which will lead to higher paying jobs, which helps reduce the people that are eligible. That's where we need to go. We need to grow our economy. We need to provide people better paying jobs. Now, and we can't do that without providing businesses resources they need to actually grow.
Speaking of the economy, that's kind of my next question. Let's go to you, Senator Thomas. The state's economy, by most accounts, is doing fairly well. I'm wondering, first, if you agree with that, and if not, where are the areas that we can improve, and what are the types of policies that your caucus is interested in pursuing that will help us do that?
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, the numbers are good, and we have a good, strong economy in the state. and it's getting better. And now, by the Trump administration removing the regulations that they've done, the tax reductions that have made this country competitive for the first time in decades at the tax level, we're seeing great response to that in this state and of course across the nation. Our numbers are much better, so that's good. So then you come to the thought, well, how do we make our economy better in this state? It's not by taking money from the taxpayers and spending it and putting it in the government's coffers and spending it on programs. That's not how you improve the economy. That's been proven right now wrong. So secondly, what do? Well, we've got all these opportunities in mining and resources in this state that right now we're on the cusp of getting 2 or 3 projects approved that will be new job opportunities, new grand economic opportunities with those mines being permitted and going into place.
You're talking about Libby and perhaps Copper Creek up in White Sulphur Springs.
Yep, and those generate not just great monies for families that will earn a great living there and those communities, but for the state of Montana and all of, I mean, technically government, feeds at that deal. There's huge revenue that comes into the state of Montana to do those things, if those things take place. And so the public as well in this last election said no to that crazy initiative that was proposed that would have shut those things down.
I-186.
I-186, and they're continuing to move forward, and I think it's like Representative Schreiner's, he represents a lot of people, a lot of working people that are excited about the potential of those jobs. And it's a great day to grow the economy in that way and not tax people more and take the money out of the economy, make the economy worse. We don't make the economy better with government. We need the government to be there to help people that are disabled, get an education, whatever it might be, but we don't need to be helping people that have the ability to take care of themselves.
Now, Representative Schreiner, do you agree that the government doesn't have a role in helping the economy along, as described by Senator Thomas? And also, as you answer that, let's kind of maybe chat a little bit about the infrastructure proposal that the governor is doing and would like to do, and that I'm assuming that you probably support.
Oh, for sure I support it. We've been working, I've said numerous times, it's embarrassing we haven't gotten that done in the last, at least in my time in the legislature. I would disagree. And actually, I don't think that's what the senator was saying. He just said how great the government did under the Trump administration on making things better. Well, then you can't say the government didn't play a part in it. We could disagree if that's true or not as well, but I don't want to get into national politics.
Me neither.
I think, I will say that I think that government doesn't, we recognize as Democrats that government doesn't create jobs, but government does play a part in making sure that the environment for business to be successful is adequate. And that's the role that government plays. And that's what our focus is. We want to make sure that the small businesses in my House district and House districts across the state have an environment that they're allowed to be competitive, but they're also allowed to be able to grow so that they can provide better wages to their employees, which helps everybody in all these circumstances. Now, to talk about infrastructure, of course we're on board with it. It's crazy that the state hasn't passed them, and this proposal is statewide and funds some things that are very much needed in our state. And not only needed from the aspect that we have crumbling things going on as far as water systems, roads, but also for us to grow our economy, we have to focus. In the proposal right now, we talk about upgrading the dental building in Great Falls. Well, Montana has a real need for better dental services statewide. How do you do that? Well, you provide facilities that are state-of-the-art so that our folks can get trained and we can grow our own. And we have a huge workforce shortage we're looking at, especially when we're talking about skilled jobs. We got to do better, and we have to invest in facilities that can train those folks so they can have jobs that they can stay in Montana.
Quickly on infrastructure, Senator Thomas, I know that your caucus has supported a lot of that package that the governor's put forth in the past, and probably this time as well. But there are parts that they consistently vote no. Big buildings on university campuses, for an example. Right? He mentioned the dental hygiene building in Great Falls. Some of these big urban projects, why are they voting that down? What's wrong with investing in our communities in the state in that fashion?
Well, a couple of things I would say in response to that. One is that the straw man, as we set this up, we want this infrastructure package here that has some things that people won't support. So then if that doesn't pass, then we didn't invest in an infrastructure. I mean, that's the straw man argument there. The fact is that we authorize and continue to authorize and will authorize in this next legislative session hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure.
Well, that happens all the time, though.
Right on, but that's my point. We do a ton of stuff that is authorized and is ongoing. There's a few pieces that have not been authorized. I've supported some of that in the past, and I probably will again, but that doesn't mean that everybody does in the legislature. And so this last time, we had the bonding issue. Like it or not, that was kind of held over everybody's head. And then when that kind of finally said, we're not going to get that done, so then there was a way to pay for it, and that wasn't approved. So it's not an easy task to get it all done in a legislative session. You got 150 class presidents, and they don't always agree on everything.
Okay.
But Mike, the expectation should be that we do get it done, and I think that I would call on the majority to set a better expectation of their members that this is important for the people of Montana, and so the expectation has to be that we're going to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Okay. We're getting down toward the end of our show. Just a couple of political questions I'm curious about. You mentioned about having a Republican governor in 2020 or 2021. And I heard some of this talk last week. It was almost as though I heard Republicans saying, we're not going to give Governor Bullock any wins. We're going to kind of hold on the fort until we get a Republican governor and do what we want. Is that what you're saying? And is that what the people of Montana want?
Well,
I mean, he was elected.
Yes, he was. And he is our governor. And he is a good man. And so, look, the difference is that we put a lot of things forward for him to consider and put in place, and he's vetoed them. We're not on the same page with the governor all the time on issues. And so why go down that road and have a bunch of things that he's just going to not go along with? He's got his eye on the national scene, and that's okay. We're good with that. We don't want to mess with him in a lot of ways. The same token, we want to take care of the business of the state and do it in a good job. And if there are things we agree with, let's get them right done. But we're trying to concentrate on what we can get done with him and accomplished with him is what I mean, and then not worry about everything else until we get the right person in place that will go along with the good ideas that we have.
And what about the Democratic minority? Of course, I know the Democratic minority likes to peel off a few Republicans and get some things done with a working majority, as you called it, and the governor will agree to it, and most of the Republicans are going to vote no. What are the Democrats prepared to say to the Republican majority, which is controlled for quite some time? We're going to give you something. There's some things you'd like to accomplish. Okay, we'll do it. Is there anything that you look at and say, okay, we'll do it?
Well, I would say the main priorities that we're looking at this session are bipartisan things. That's why we're in the minority. We need Republicans to come vote with us. Everything we pass is a bipartisan issue. So I think that the answers in the bills that we've passed and the numbers of the votes, there's only 42 of us. Last session there was 41. So we need a number of people to come across, get to the table and be willing to do the work. And that's why I use the working majority, because we feel like we are always going to be in the working majority when we're in the right.
We've got about 1 minute left here. Each of you, I'd like to just tell me one thing that we haven't talked about that you'd like us to be doing next session.
That you as in the media force or the state?
That you as Republicans or as lawmakers would like to do in the next session that we haven't talked about so far on the show today.
One of the things, I know it's a bit of back to where we were a second ago, but we plan to try and work on and flush out and be prepared with legislative ideas and things for the 21 session as well as this session. Okay. So we're planning for that. It's a big deal to us.
Okay. Your lightning round is up.
We prioritized firefighter health and safety, which I wish that I heard more from the majority. Firefighters' families shouldn't shoulder the burden of sicknesses that they get because of their job, and we need to fix that.
Okay. We were listening to Senator Fred Thomas, Republican Senate Majority Leader, and also House Minority Leader Casey Schreiner from Great Falls. I'd like to thank both gentlemen for joining us today on Face the State, talking about the legislature. And we'll be back again in a few weeks to talk a little bit more about what's happening in Helena. I'm Mike Dennison. Thank you.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.